And it's important because I don't think anybody, maybe there are a few exceptions, but I don't think anybody is just going to magically be able to just create all this great content. You know, like there's no substitute for experience and for hard work.
Podcast Junkies, episode 58. This is getting good, folks. Today's episode is with Jerod Morris. Now, if you're new to the show, Podcast Junkies is the podcaster's voice. It's conversations in a casual setting with the people behind some of the most popular shows in iTunes and folks that I've admired and that I'm dying to talk to and that I get the opportunity to talk to and to share those conversations with you so that you get a little bit more information and insights into their minds, into their way of thinking, into how they approach their shows, and I think more importantly, a little bit about their personalities, and hopefully something comes through that you may not necessarily hear on their own shows. I try to get from them a bit more insight into what makes them tick, and I find that it becomes easier with each new episode that I do, and it's something that really excites me, and this episode is no different. Jerod is the host of the Copyblogger / Rainmaker FM's podcast. It's called The Showrunner. He's also the host of several other podcasts, including Primility Primer, which is an interesting podcast about the intersection of pride and humility. So make sure you check that out. And he's also got a couple of other podcasts related to the Indiana sports Podcast on the Brink and Assembly Call. So check those out. And more importantly, listen to all the fabulous nuggets of wisdom that Jerod imparts. You can tell that he's got a lot of experience doing this, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I think there was just so much that you can take away from this, whether you're existing already with your podcast or you're just getting started and you need a reason as to why to get started, or you think it might not be the right time, or you think it's too late. We address all those in our conversation, and we really have a fantastic time doing it. In case you missed last week's episode, we spoke to The Real Brian from Profitcast and also the audiblebooks.com podcast. Brian is another bundle of energy and just a lot of fantastic insights that have come as a result of his journey podcasting. So check that out. That was episode 57. So for now, sit back and enjoy my conversation with Jerod Morris. So Jerod Morris, thank you for joining us on Podcast Junkies.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
I am as well, and I'm glad we finally got to chat for a little bit at Podcast Movement, and that it was an amazing collection of podcasters all in one place for 2 to 3 days. Just it's awesome because you're with your tribe and you can actually talk about things like download numbers and microphones and without feeling like a total nerd. So
exactly, and interview strategy and everything else. And I think what I love about an event like that so much is when you get a room full of podcasters. Most of us started podcasts because we're passionate about a topic. And so all of the conversations that you're having these conversations with people who are really passionate about the topic they have. And now they're passionate about their podcast because it's helping them reach an audience about that topic. And so there was just maybe more than almost any conference I've been to, more enthusiasm in the one-on-one conversations than I can remember. And I love it because that's the fun stuff. I mean, I may not even be interested in what your topic is, but I love talking with you about your podcast and how you get it out to your audience. And it's just lots of enthusiasm, which made for a wonderful 2 days.
So I really enjoyed your talk. You gave a talk at the actual conference, and there was a lot of things that resonated with me. And I think it was something you had covered in, was it in the Lede or the Showrunner, where you mentioned some of the points on some of the topics you had covered during that talk?
We all of those, everything that I talked about in that presentation, we've covered on the Showrunner.
Yeah,
because it's really that's kind of the core of what we're trying to teach people, and the big idea we're trying to get across with the Showrunner is this idea of viewing what you're doing with your podcast as more than just creating audio episodes, really creating an experience and taking an audience on a journey. And that's the big idea. It was the big idea that I hope I got across in that presentation is what does it take to create something remarkable for an audience? And I think the basic pillars there are not that much different than what it is on a blog and even what it is on a TV show or what it is for a live event. Those elements of authenticity and usefulness, sustainability and profitability. But, really trying to bring them into the context of podcasting and give people some real kind of hard parts to grasp onto that hopefully they could take and then add to their shows.
What I find so interesting is you and Johnny are with the podcast are one of the few folks I see constantly referring to the fact that you see this position as being a showrunner. And I, obviously, being a podcast junkie, I listen to so many podcasts, and I don't see a lot of people taking that approach. And I wonder if it's something or if it's an influence that you have, maybe from, because I think it comes from the TV industry, correct? And so
that's where the term originally came from. This idea of a showrunner. The first time I heard it was with Vince Gilligan in Breaking Bad, because I was a huge Breaking Bad fan. So much that I got into listening to the podcasts and just the whole thing, really getting into it for how they created each episode and the craft that went into it. And so that's where I first heard the term showrunner. I think a lot of people first heard it from Lost with Damon Lindelof and J.J. Abrams, and because for a long time, you didn't really know who was behind TV shows as much, and now there's so much more interaction with the people who are creating the shows, and, you're kind of getting to find out what they're thinking and see a little bit of their process. And I think a lot of times, and really, I know this is how I viewed it. It's like, okay, I'm doing a podcast. There's a specific audience that listens to podcasts and a certain amount of time that they have every day to listen to their podcast. And I'm trying to get that amount of time. But I think really as we continue to evolve, all of the different entertainment options are just kind of morphing together. Like it's like, we all have a finite amount of time every day that we can consume something, and so I think it's smart in a big picture way as we think about reaching an audience to not just think about we're trying to get just the portion of time they listen to podcasts. Like we're just trying to get in there and compete with, okay, am I going to read a book? Am I going to watch a TV show? Or am I going to, listen to a podcast? And I think all of that, either audio or visual entertainment, they're all shows, and there's an expectation there with an audience and a journey you can take them on. And so I think just for us, that big idea of thinking about it in terms of a show and you individually thinking of yourself as a showrunner as opposed to just a podcaster is kind of this bigger idea that we think will really serve people well in the future and really growing it big and making it something, that is either a business on its own or something that really contributes to someone's business. And it's something that seems to have really resonated. And I think for us, in terms of, there's obviously a lot of great podcasts about podcasting out there. And so many of them are so well done. And, there are, some great ones too that deal with the technical side and with that part of it. And that's not our area of expertise anyway. And so we knew we wanted to differentiate from those. And I think for us, what most people who really love the show have told us that they love is, combining some real strategic thinking, in terms of how a podcast fits into a bigger overall business goal, but then just the mentality, the mindset, the motivation, the inspiration, the enthusiasm. Because one thing we all know as podcasters, we all deal with is, struggling, whether it's episode 7 or 25, or we get a little bit further into it, struggling for that next episode or hitting that rut. And what do we do? And we really want to help try and push people past that because when you talk to people, when they get past that, usually something great happens, but we know there's just the web is just this graveyard of shows that have been abandoned, and there have been this great audience right around the corner for that person. And so we want to try and be hopefully the source of inspiration that gets you over that hump so you can see what's around the corner and see if it's as promising as hopefully you think it is. So that's our big idea behind the Showrunner.
And I think it's important, the concept that you're alluding to of being in it for the long haul, because people are so short-sighted. And I think now with a lot of folks, and you may have seen this as you were starting in terms of what was inspiring you in terms of courses, because I know you guys have a course as well. A lot of people probably have some sort of get rich quick mentality or get famous quick or whatever it is they're looking for. I have this feeling that this is going to shake itself out in the next 6 to 12 months with people who are just jumping on the quote unquote podcasting bandwagon, as opposed to those who really appreciate the craft of putting a quality show together and delivering something of value to their audience.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's no different than blogging. It's no different than anything else online. And there's going to be, and there are a whole lot of people who are rushing to get in it, get something out really quickly. And I think that's great because those people are coming in, but they won't last. And the shows that last, I mean, you can build attention quickly, but you can't really build an audience quickly. You know, you need, I think for a real audience relationship, you need trust. And trust is only built over time. And trust is built when an audience comes with an expectation of getting something useful and you deliver. When they come with an expectation of you're going to show up when you say you do and you deliver and you do it over time. And people come to count on you and they come to rely on you and they come to trust you. And, you know, you build that great relationship to where, you know, you'll say something on an episode and someone emails you this really personal story or tells you about how it impacted them because they feel comfortable telling you because they almost feel like you're a friend, even though you've never met, but it's had that kind of impact. And I mean, yes, at some point, you know, we talk about profitability. We all have to get something out of the time we put into running our shows. And if we're putting enough time into it, that may need to be monetary to make it worth our time. And there is nothing wrong with that. And I think that's an element of creating a remarkable show because that helps you keep doing it for the long run. But I think the people who really end up creating the remarkable shows are in it as much for that or they're in it even more for that connection that they create. And that only happens over time. But when you reach that kind of sweet spot where you've done it for a while, you've proven to yourself that you can do it, you've proven to an audience that you'll keep showing up, and you've spent that time creating the connection, it really creates something wonderful. And I think and there's something unique about it with a podcast because it's a voice. And, you know, everything you're feeling when you're behind the microphone is going to come out in your voice. Like there's no way to mask it. You know, if you're scared, it can be heard in your voice. And if you're excited, it will be heard in your voice. And your audience gets to know you and they'll say, hey, you didn't quite have the same energy that episode. Like, you okay? You know? And that's a great thing. It's a really great thing. And so I think that rawness of it gives you such a unique ability to create a connection with an audience, but it's only going to happen in a way that really matters over the long term.
And I think that aspect of it is so important. I think a lot of podcasters shy away from it, this concept of being raw or being real, because they feel like they're being too vulnerable. And I think it's something that it sounds like you encourage it with your students. And when I talk to fellow podcasters and new podcasters, I encourage them to try to be themselves as much as possible, because I think I've found that's what the audience resonates with. And you're actually going to rub some people the wrong way, and they're not going to be your audience. And so you want those people probably as far away from you as quick as possible. But the people that do are the ones who are going to be your true fans.
That's a great point. I mean, I think repelling the people who are not your audience is almost as important as attracting the people who are. And, you know, it's interesting, you know, because what you're alluding to is this element of authenticity. And I think vulnerability is part of that. I think you've got to be vulnerable with the audience, but, you know, you've got to do it in the right way, because I do think there's a difference between authenticity and transparency. And it sometimes gets people into trouble because, you know, whatever your show is about, you're reaching an audience that they're coming to your show with some kind of expectation, whether it's to be entertained, to be educated, to be inspired, whatever it is. And ostensibly, it's about some kind of topic. And so the areas that you're vulnerable, I do think you want to be strategic about those. Like, for instance, on this show right now, it would do me no good to come on here and say, like, you know, I've been struggling with my weight, and here are things, like, who cares? Like, that doesn't matter. But if I come on here and talk about how, you know, just earlier today, we were getting ready to record an episode of the Showrunner, and it was about a half hour before, and I did not feel like doing it. Like, frankly, it's episode 28. I had a lot of stuff going on. I didn't have a great idea for what the topic was going to be about. And a part of me wanted to email John and be like, hey, can we push the recording back? Just because and then all these, you know, different excuses are coming into my head. And it's one of those moments where you get overwhelmed because you know you've got to record, and, you know, and I didn't know what to say. And so, you know, we get on the phone, we talked it out, you know, about, you know, what topic, and we end up finding out this great topic. And I think we created a great episode. and sometimes it just takes having that commitment to the weekly episode so that you can't, you don't have the excuse of saying, I don't want to do it. You have to, that helps. And even people, I run 5 shows. I do shows all the time and I still fight that. That is a vulnerability. That's authenticity that matters because, to this audience right here. And so I think it's important. What are we revealing? Because you can turn people off by wasting their time revealing parts about yourself that only matter to you. That's narcissism. That's not really authenticity. So it's important to understand what the audience needs and what part of your story and your journey can help them on theirs. And that sweet spot is where authenticity really happens. That's such a key point because so many podcasters struggle with continuing, and you alluded to pod fading and the magic 7 episodes, and I think now the second phase is 25. I've heard that before, 23. Yeah. So that's like you have to hit the second stage in order to continue, and then probably 100 is the number after that. Mm-hmm. But it's every podcaster's dream to just show up, record, and then just magically walk away, like I imagine Howard Stern does when he's done, and have the production elves take over and the social media elves take over, and do all the heavy lifting for you. But because this is really the fun part, right? Talking to people that we admire or that we respect, and that we can talk shop for an hour is really the fun part. But I think motivating ourselves in almost the same way we do for something like the gym. I just picked up CrossFit again, and just those first couple of sessions are just you're dying, but you have to see the long haul and the road that's going to lead to something. Yeah, and it's the thing is with that I've found out with every show is when you reach that moment where you're not excited about recording the next episode, it doesn't mean you don't love your topic. It doesn't mean you're not cut out for podcasting. It doesn't mean that you're letting fear take you over. It doesn't mean you don't care about your audience. It doesn't matter about any of these things. It just means that you're a human podcaster. It happens all the time. And a lot of people, I think, get deterred by that and interpret it in a way that I don't think is fair to themselves or their ability to do this, and that's why sometimes having some kind of built-in way to make sure that you can fight through that. It's like people talk about with gyms. If you pay to go to a gym, you're going to be much more likely to go, because you kind of got something at stake. Or if you get a personal trainer, the value of the personal trainer isn't as much what they're teaching you as just like the accountability to show up because you made an appointment. And, and I think a lot of people, if they'll, when they get to that really step back, I didn't, and I had to learn this the hard way because I used to interpret it this way too and think, well, I'm on the wrong track. I need to get a new topic. Boy, this was a disaster. No, it's not that. I love talking about podcasting. I love the Showrunner audience. I love talking to Johnny. It's just for this hour window of time, for whatever reason, I wasn't quite feeling it, and it happens. It's okay. And, you'll get it back going. And part of that is just the experience of going through it a few times. And so that's one thing that we really want to do. And I think people who have run shows have a responsibility to do for people who were coming up new is share these experiences because so many of them are universal. We're all special and unique, like snowflakes, like our mom told us, but really our experiences are pretty similar, I found. And so I think sharing these just lets people know, hey, you know what? Okay, I felt like that and he got through it. And okay, that's part of the deal. And there's still people out there who have 400 episodes and, going on and on. Okay, I can do this. Get past it. And so that's a big message that we want to get across to people is just, if you really have to stop for whatever reason it is, okay. I realize that sometimes there are, but don't let it be something like that makes you stop. Yeah, and I'm a big proponent of putting that self-imposed rigidity of a schedule. I recently committed on the air to Mondays as releasing my episode, and I can't tell you how much stress that incurs. When it's the week before and you don't have the episode ready, and some days, and sometimes you get 3 in 1 week and you're like, yes, I'm set. But it's amazing how quickly those 3 get spent. And then, yes, and then you're back okay, I don't have anything lined up, and it's positive pressure, I guess, right? It's really good because it pushes you to sort of be creative, and I think it gets the mind working in a way that's beneficial to you and your show. It is. And I think a lot of times we surprise ourselves. And I mean, I had an example of this recently. So I've had this site Primility, and I've always wanted to do a podcast with it. And I've always been kind of afraid. I've never quite known what direction to go. Should it be an interview show? Should it be this, that, or the other? Total paralysis by analysis. And I finally, one day I was like, I just had this thought. I was like, what if I just did a daily show? What if every morning I got up and just did a daily show at like 6:30? I'll just flip on the microphone. I'll say whatever comes into my head, and that'll be a show. And I've learned through difficult practice that I shouldn't just jump into it and do it, because a lot of times my enthusiasm gets the best of me. So I waited a couple of days. I didn't tell anybody about it yet. I wanted to make sure I could do it, but I got up one day and did it. And in addition to just doing the podcast part, I scheduled it as a Google Hangout, because I realized that when I have a live broadcast to show up for, I'm there, I'm ready, I'm prepared, because once the green light goes on, you got to go and it's live. You can't get out of it. And I figured, let me channel that and see what can happen with it. And so just started doing it. And, by far, the episodes haven't been perfect and they've been difficult. And it's actually required more preparation than I thought. Like the dream of just, then I'll just flip on the mic and I'll know exactly what to say. It's taken more preparation and all that. But, I started on July 14th. And I think as of us doing this episode, I just did episode 56 this morning. I haven't missed a weekday. I overslept one day and had to do the episode later that day. But having, and there have been a lot of days where I didn't know what to say like 10 minutes beforehand. And I'm like, and normally I would have just said, I'm not doing this. But, having it live, knowing that people can watch that live at 6:30. And if I'm not there, I'm breaking a promise. And having the streak going, not wanting to break that, like all of those things, it's funny, they kind of push you. And as it gets closer and closer to the light coming on, the mind is like, you got to say something. So you better come up with something, So, and now I've gotten better at keeping notes in Evernote. So I have this, I have a file of stuff I can go to, and it's really pushed me as a content creator to new heights, I guess you could say, just in terms of keeping that commitment, and making sure that I'm always on the lookout for new content, because I need something for tomorrow and then I need something for the next day. And it's really, really helped. And I think putting that constraint in that I have to do it and announcing it and putting it out there, granted, I think I'm more prepared to do it now because I've run a lot of shows and have had more experience. And this is an idea that I've been thinking about for a long time. So that helps. But yeah, putting it out there and giving yourself some kind of schedule where there's going to be a consequence if you don't meet it, sometimes that helps you get through the times when you don't want to be there. Because there have been times when I haven't wanted to be there talking, but I'll be damned now if I'm going to break the streak, and if I'm going to break that promise to the audience. So it's really helped. And it's something, for people who may find that they struggle with that can really help you get over the hump. And then you're really grateful after the fact that you did it.
So the podcast is called Primility Primer.
Yes.
And primility is a word that actually you created in 2005. Is that right?
I did. Yeah, I did. I merged pride and humility together to create that one. For some reason, I've always liked creating words and like putting two words together. So I got a whole list of them, but that's the one that has always, I guess, resonated the most.
So what was happening in 2005 that was the impetus for you to feel that this is a topic that was important for you?
It's a great question. I was actually, at the time, I was in Miami, Florida. I had moved there after I graduated college. And when I originally moved to Miami, I was teaching. And I left the job as a teacher and had been in a bit of a transition phase. And so I responded to this random ad looking for a sales position on monster.com. And it turned out that it was this crazy company that was selling coupon books, like door to door and in businesses, kind of like a multi-level marketing type thing. And not at all what I was expecting. And yet I kind of got into it. I didn't have anything better to do at the time. And so I got into this thing and actually found that I really liked it. Like for a short term, it was great. And I probably learned more from this job than I've learned in a lot of other jobs, just about the importance of attitude and sales and a lot of different things. But, I dove into it 100% to where I was working 7 days a week, like literally from 7 to like 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, going crazy. And I kind of realized that, something I've always struggled with is balance. Like I go 100 miles an hour in one direction, but kind of everything else kind of falters. And then I end up finding that I need to, switch back in the other direction, whether it's, work or working out or whatever it is. And I realized that like that's great and all when you're young, but if I ever wanted to actually like have a family, build a stable life, really become what I wanted to become, I needed to get better at balance. And to me, I've always kind of thought about things in terms of pride and humility. And I kind of looked at it and I realized if I could balance those two, because pride would get me in trouble a lot of times where I'd think I had all the answers and could just go. And, didn't have the humility to take a step back and realize that, I'm not Superman and there are other people who, know more than me and I should stop and ask them questions and stop and learn. And all these areas, I just started to see that this kind of combination, if I could learn how to balance these two things, it would really set me up. And I'd get to places that I wanted to go and I would stop having these regrets of being out of balance. And so, and one of the things they do at this company is they want you to think like a business owner because the whole idea is you're going to eventually get your team and move to the new office and do all of this stuff. And so they want you to create a business name. And so that was my name. It was Primility Marketing. That's what I was going to be. And, so it kind of became this thing. But then when I left that company, shortly thereafter, actually, that stuck with me. And it's always been kind of this guiding principle that I kind of feel like whenever I feel a little bit off, I try to step back and say, okay, which am I, am I kind of being too prideful? Am I being too humble? Because you can be too humble too. You can sit on the sidelines instead of thinking, hey, I need to get out there and kind of having that self-awareness and then trying to make my next action one that pulls me closer into balance has just always been really, really helpful and beneficial. And I've seen lots of good results from it.
Yeah, one of the early episodes you mentioned this fake humbleness. These I think it was the ESPYs or something, where the athletes come up and I'm so humbled to receive this trophy. Or something.
Yeah, are you really? So receiving our trophy humbled you, huh? Like, and I get what people are trying to say, because they don't want to be like, yeah, I'm the best.
Yeah.
They want to seem humble, but yeah, I mean, it's funny because you hear that a lot, but it is definitely, I think, a misuse of the term for what people are actually trying to get across.
But it's something you don't think about until, when you mentioned it. It's funny. People say, you just take it for granted when people say, I'm so humble. You hear at the Oscars, what are the Emmys, any award show, thank God I'm so humbled that you guys thought of me. But when you think about it, it's really, it's not authentic,
No, it's not. I mean, say, man, I am really proud to have won this award. Thank you. Like this award means a lot. And I'm humbled to be in the presence of so many great people, because that's a humbling experience, but winning the award isn't humbling. That's a proud moment, unless it's, like worst podcaster, that would be humbling. I don't want to win that award,
There's, I wonder if there's a Rotten Tomatoes for podcasting. Or was it Razzies or something?
Yeah, the Razzies. Yeah, for the worst. That would be humbling.
Yeah, someone's probably going to come up with that pretty soon.
Yeah.
Did you always have an interest in wordplay?
Yeah, always. That was always. I just always have. I mean, I remember, back in high school, like there was an etymology elective that we could take, and I loved that. I've always loved words. For some reason, I've loved combining words. One of my friends will always, kind of send me like these old emails I used to send her in college, and they would always have these made up words like wonderific and all these, and I would just come up with them. And words have just always been really fun for me. I enjoy them. So
and those come in handy when you must be looking for unique domain names as well.
Yes, yeah, they do. That was the nice thing about Primility. When I went to type it in, I was not surprised that no one had that domain. So.
I recently interviewed Helen Zaltzman of The Allusionist. I don't know if you've listened to that podcast. Mm-mm. I think she's got a comedy show that she's had for years, and she's from the UK. But she studies like the origins of words and how they're used in society, and it's called The Allusionist, ALLUSIONIST.
Ah, very nice.
Yes, and she's got a wicked sense of humor, so it's really fun to listen to, and the episodes are only like 20 minutes or something like that. So
yeah,
she's part of Roman Mars's Radiotopia.
Oh, she is?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, so she's
who was incredible at Podcast Movement.
Yeah,
Rowan was
it
great.
was so funny that I went last year and it was heavy on the entrepreneurial, and so a lot of people were complaining about that. And then this year they really 10x'd it, and I think they knocked it out of the park because there was everything there. There was storytelling, and then there was all sorts of, obviously a little bit of the entrepreneurial stuff, but just, the fact that you had Sarah Koenig and Roman Mars and Leah Tao and just so many, and I think even fans showed up this time. It's typically what you don't see at a conference like that.
Yeah. No, I thought it was great because, again, I mean, the business stuff is important because I think that's a big part of the profitability aspect of it. But, when you look at it, in terms of how do you create an authentic connection, how do you really create useful content for your audience, being able to tell a compelling audio story is so important. And that doesn't mean that you can't, describe technical stuff. Like when we're doing the Showrunner, we're trying to give people, kind of nuts and bolts stuff they can use the next time they're recording their podcast. But there's a way to do that and kind of tell a story about it and make it compelling. And I thought that was really what I took away from Podcast Women, is just that holistic approach to what makes a good show. What is it? And I mean, there were so many people there. I mean, all the names you mentioned that are so successful at this, and just being able to get little pieces of their brain and what makes them tick and what makes their shows tick was invaluable.
I ran into him at the elevator once he was done. It was just coincidence. And he was in the elevator bank, and then it opened and he got in. And then I think everyone else was waiting for another elevator. So I jumped in, and I'm in the elevator with him, and I'm like, what can I say? What can I say? What can I say? And I was like, I'm going to interview Helen Zaltzman. He's like, oh yeah, she's wonderful. She's she's really, really a treasure. And then I said, because I'm trying to get Hrishikesh Hirway from Song Exploder on as well. And he said, oh yeah, that's good. And I said, yeah, I'm working my way up to you. And he's like, oh yeah. Anytime. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm going to hold off till I'm actually ready to line up that interview. But
oh man, that'd be great.
But yeah, the beauty of having a show that speaks to podcasters is I'll never run out of people to talk to. So
that is true. That is true. And people who like coming on and talking.
Yeah, and they always have good mics.
Yes.
So I've been getting caught up on Primility, and
thank you.
I think I'm about episode 12 or something like that. I think Be the Change is the one I'm at now. So
oh yeah,
and they're easily consumable. I can sort of blast through 5 to 10 in one shot and just get like a daily dose. I'm wondering if for you that's the equivalent of writing the 1,000 words a day.
Yeah, it is in a lot of ways. I mean, there's something that the other reason I started that show too is I work from home, and I think a lot of people who end up podcasting, they may work from home. And for some reason, I just got fed up with, it's kind of the dream, right? To roll out of bed, work in your pajamas, it's 5 o'clock and you're still in your pajamas and all that stuff. And that is great for a little while, but I kind of got sick of it a little bit. And I realized I kind of wanted a trigger for my morning. And that's the other thing, is I knew if I had a live show that was on camera, I would actually shower and make myself presentable. And so it's actually like it's one of the silly motivations that got me to start. That doesn't really motivate me to do it anymore, but it was kind of one of those early things when I'm convincing myself, okay, so you really want to get up at 5:30 in the morning every morning and do this, right? And I'm like, yeah, this is me, my little internal monologue, yeah, no, let's do this. We'll shower. It'll be great. Be all ready for the day. And now, yes, it's become more of, that practice of get up and create content, get up and really think, because obviously there have always been kind of these core principles that I wanted to talk about and core stories and examples, but you run through those really quick when you're doing a daily show. So then it's about finding new ones and finding new stories and finding new ways to explain the same ideas and different ways to explain it to make it resonate with different people. And that challenge, it's really helping me develop the idea. And I don't know what I want to do with the idea in the future. I just know that by doing this every day, it will help me find it and get there. But it also just helps me in a general sense really get better at breaking a topic down and figuring out angles to talk about and different episodes and different ways of structuring them and different ways of explaining points. And that helps not just with that show, but with all the different shows and really everything that I do as a content creator. So yeah, that daily aspect of it is just, doing that at the beginning of the day. It's kind of like, working out or stretching, for kind of those content creator muscles. And so it's really, really helped in that regard.
There seems to be another theme with the class that you and Johnny run with Showrunner, and then the ideas that you wrap up within Primility, that you like and have had experience in teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I come from a family of teachers, actually. My dad, he's a scout in the NFL right now, but he was a college football coach for a long time, which is essentially a teacher, and actually taught right when he got out of college. And his dad was a teacher. And so I think, on my dad's side, I come from just a lot of teachers. And, I went to school for business and, had dreams in the middle of college of moving to Hollywood and being a screenwriter and doing all of those things. But when I finally graduated, the one thing I really wanted to do was teach. I saw a call out for Teach for America and really wanted to do that. And, so I think there's something about that I've always been drawn to. And I think that's why I get so excited about the Showrunner, Primility, everything is it is about teaching, and it's about, trying to take a topic and explain it in a way that's meaningful to somebody else and in a way that maybe didn't originally make sense to me, but makes sense to them. And so you're trying to bridge that gap. And I think I was probably destined to do something in teaching no matter what, because I really love doing it.
And then the other layer on top of that is the mentoring aspect, and because you're involved with Big Brothers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Big Brother, Big Sister.
And how has that influenced or enhanced your life participating with that organization?
I think, I think it is the biggest thing is it's kind of that constant reminder about the example that you're setting, because it's, when you have someone who's kind of looking at your example and that and I don't have kids yet, and I imagine this is kind of what it's like when you're a parent, but when you have someone who's kind of looking at your example and looking at what you do to see what's right and wrong and to see how they should handle situations, because I think you can, say things and impart, spoken wisdom and try and tell someone, lessons, but it's really more what you do and the example that you set. And I think that's probably the biggest thing I've gotten from that is just that, I wear, my red wristband is kind of my reminder about Primility, but really the biggest wristband or the biggest reminder is knowing the people who are looking at you and watching you. And it's, okay, maybe I would like to do this right now, but I can't, that's just selfish me talking and, I'm setting an example. There's people watching. Let's, do the right thing, do this, that, or the other. So I think it's really helped from that aspect. And hopefully my example, my influence has been a positive one too.
What has the response been to Primility, the videos and the podcast?
It's been really good. Really good. I think there's very rarely anybody watching live, which, and I had no idea how that was going to go because I've done some other live shows. I really didn't know if this would catch on as like this live thing and all these people congregate at 6:30 Central Time to watch. Like every now and then I'll be, because I've got the Google Hangout screen up as I'm talking and I'll see down at the bottom, it shows you how many live viewers and the 0 will switch to 1. And I'm like, oh my God, someone's watching. This is great, So that part of it, the live part of it, has really been a lot more for me than the audience because the audience doesn't seem to care that much. But the response to the episodes has been it's been incredible. It's because you get these emails from people, and like one lady emailed me a couple of weeks ago, and she signed up and requested a wristband and sent me this long note about how her husband had been laid off and they had just, they just bought a house and they have a daughter coming. Husband had been laid off and he's been really kind of down in the dumps and depressed and not feeling well. And he'd listened to an episode of Primility and talked to her about, how much of a difference it made. And she's like, that's the first time I'd seen him really excited about something in a while. And it's like, and she was asking me, could you send a wristband? It's his birthday's coming up and I'd love to, give him this for his birthday. And it's like, wow.
That's
and
cool.
What's really interesting about that is the day she sent me that was one of the days that I didn't want to do it. Like I kind of got up and I was like, I'm not feeling like doing this. And, kind of came up with an idea right at the last second. And then that happens and you think, man, imagine if I hadn't done that episode, and it's just like when you get to that point with an audience where the audience is giving you as much juice and enthusiasm as you're giving them, and it's a real like back and forth and you're feeding off of each other, that is the sweet spot. And I wasn't sure how it was going to go because it's this, made up word, and I've written blog posts about it, but never, and those have gotten a decent response, but I've never put it out there like this. And especially, being a little bit the episodes aren't perfect. They're not polished. I stumble around a little bit. Like just this morning I did one and I got off and I'm like, damn it, I meant to say this, but they're not scripted and I don't really plan it that much. So that's going to happen. But just to see that getting on there and just, kind of choosing a topic, talking about it for 10 minutes, being open, being honest about it, and then seeing that response, like that one, and there have been others like that. It's hard to put into words, and people who have created content will understand it, and who have had that happen will understand it. But it's hard to put into words how much it means, because that's it's not making any money. It's not a business. It's a true passion project, and to have that kind of response means the world. It really does.
So, yeah, I did the 1,000 words a day for a while. It's been probably a couple of years. And when you have that sort of discipline and you wake up and you're like, I'm going to do it, I'm going to hammer through it. I think it really changes things. And I think there's a certain number of days before a habit kicks in. And I'm sure that's the case even with the project that you're taking on. Mm-hmm. So I think it's something that I'm going to think about as well, because I've wanted to get back into some sort of blogging or journaling. And I think now that, podcasters obviously like to talk and they find it easy to express their thoughts. And I think the fact that it's not scripted makes it easy, so you can just have a stream of consciousness with some sort of organization, I imagine, that'll keep you focused.
Yeah, I actually, the original idea was get up, turn on the microphone, obviously have something in mind and just talk about it. And I realized really, really quickly that giving myself about 15 minutes ahead of time because there would always be a blog post with it, but I would typically write the show notes afterwards. And I realized actually spending 15 minutes doing that first helped me feel more comfortable once the recording started, because I could organize the thoughts and kind of almost do the first draft there written. And that's really helped to kind of get it out there. But the other thing is too, of just doing it, is I think I would always want to have everything kind of plotted out beforehand. That insecurity of, I don't want to look like an idiot. But I think what happens is sometimes when you have that insecurity and you're in the moment and you don't necessarily know what you're going to say next, sometimes you come up with the best stuff that you've ever come up with. Like I think that there's just like a part of our brain sometimes that unlocks when we're just like, I gotta. And granted, sometimes it doesn't come out that way. Like you can stumble and fumble and it's not great. But I think you have to risk that and even allow that to happen to get to the really, really good stuff that sometimes just doesn't come out until you start talking and start having an open conversation, even if it's just with yourself, because it's a monologue show. So I guess I think the only way that it's worked to the extent that it has is, number one, freeing myself from expectations. Like I had to not care about downloads and numbers and any of that stuff. And I think having the quote unquote selfish reasons to do it, that I explained earlier, getting up in the morning and doing that really helped to free myself from some of the other expectations. And then just understanding and admitting some of these episodes are not going to be good. It's okay. Like it's not, if you at least bring enthusiasm to it, it'll be okay. What's the worst that can happen? Yeah. But if you do it every day, you will have some that are really good and that speak to you and that speak to other people. And that's exactly what's happened.
And I think people resonate with someone who's not perfect, right? Because nobody's perfect. And it's like, I've had this discussion with my friends about Facebook posts, how they just literally put up, here's the most ideal moment of my day. And like, no, why don't you put like, I just got a flat tire and I just like threw the crowbar across the highway, and then post that. And just like,
I just ate an entire frozen pizza. I'm awesome.
Yeah. Like I feel like crap today. Like, and this is, so that's why I've been making, a lot of use of that the block button on Facebook, because where you block them, but you're still friends, so they don't know that you block them. But it's been,
and we end up comparing ourselves to totally. Like just a constant stream of the best moment of everybody's day, and there's no other way. It's our human nature to say, "Man, I had this, and this, happen today," and it's like, wait a minute, step back. You're right. You have to have that perspective. Well, if I just put the best thing that happened today, my life would look pretty good too. So that perspective is so important. And I do think as podcasters, we run into that because, if you listen to, This American Life and Planet Money and Radio Lab, and you're just hearing these incredible shows that have all this production value behind them, you're like, holy crap, I can't do this. I can't podcast. And one thing we've tried to do with the Showrunner is really take people behind the scenes, leave the warts in, kind of walk people through when we stumble. And, we had an interview once and, we kind of had this awkward moment and we didn't know what to say. And it was like this weird moment in the interview and we just left it in and then talked about it afterwards because I think it's important that people see that, that people aren't perfect. And if someone is really, really good, they've probably got 500 episodes in the archive of getting better and improving. And you're not going to do that on episode 1. So just understand that, and just get better for yourself. So, and it's easier said than done because we all want to. There's a vulnerability of putting your voice out there and putting yourself out there, and you will be judged. I mean, if someone listens to your podcast, they're judging you. Like that's happening.
Yeah.
And if you can free yourself from, fear of that judgment, it'll really help you just be yourself. And then, of course, ironically, then get to the point where people are, judging you better than they did at the beginning.
I thought it was nice of Pat Flynn to play his very first podcast episode at the conference.
Yeah, it was. It was. And everybody has that. And I mean, you almost want to listen to everybody's first episode like that. It's a great reminder that, oh yeah, you know what? I'm okay. I'm going to be all right.
It's so crazy as podcasters, everything becomes a podcast idea. And when you just mentioned that, I thought a podcast about episode 1, you could call
that would be just replaying the first episode of famous podcasts. Yeah, or that's a great idea.
Get people on and you have them play a couple of snippets from their first episode, and you're like, and this is where you can go now. I don't need that responsibility right now, but I guess I'm throwing it out there.
It's such a great show idea, though. I love that. That's really good.
That would be interesting. Oh, well, let me see if we revisit that. But I mean, speaking of finding the time, so you said five podcasts: the Showrunner, Assembly Call, Podcast on the Brink, Primility Primer, and the Lede.
Yep. Yeah. So the Showrunner and the Lede are both. Those are kind of for work, quote unquote, for what I do for Rainmaker Digital, and the other ones are just side projects.
Do the podcasts, because they're in a variety of different topics, and I'm wondering if you've been able, because of the nature of the topics that they cover, they're so varied, to help round you out as a person, because you feel like you're getting to speak and talk about topics that you value in all these different shows.
Sometimes I view it that way, and then other times, like this morning, I have near panic attacks where I'm thinking, why am I doing all these shows on different topics? Like, imagine what I could do if it was just one topic all the time. The problem is, though, I would probably get bored with that, and so it's nice having these different ones. What's interesting is that they end up all morphing together because I end up talking about them all on each show, and I think they inform each other, because I would in no way be qualified to host the Showrunner without the experiences of Assembly Call, Podcast on the Brink, and Primility Primer. Because hosting the Lede is not representative for everybody. That was the Copyblogger podcast. That audience was built before I got there. It's just driving a car that's already moving. So I can't teach anybody about how to build an audience. But building something from scratch, from nothing, with the Assembly Call 4 years ago, and then going through every season at the end of the year, because that's a post-game show for IU basketball games, so it's very seasonal. So it's a really, really intense for 4 months and then not much for the rest of the year. Every single season at the end, being ready to quit, but then coming back and figuring that part of it out, and so really going through that has allowed me to relate and have relatable experiences. And it's interesting because a couple of people that listened to the Assembly Call caught wind of the Primility episodes and signed up and then tweeted it to tweeted it out. And now all these people, I've seen all these subscriptions come in from Indiana, and I'll email people, hey, how'd you hear about it? And they're like, yeah, we so-and-so tweeted it out, and, we're big IU basketball fans. We really like what you're doing over here. And it's interesting because I find a lot of times that, examples from IU basketball are really great examples for Primility, but then I'm like, well, people over here are Primility. They don't care about Indiana basketball, so I can't really use them. And now the audiences are cross-pollinating. It's like, worlds are colliding, but it's cool. It's interesting when people kind of follow you from one show to the next, because I think the topics that you talk about can be different, but your enthusiasm level that you bring to it and some of the big ideas that you talk about are going to be similar. Is like a lot of what we talk about on the Showrunner is frankly, and I mean, this even came up on an episode is, I mean, one of the keys to being a good showrunner is balancing your pride and your humility. Like that can help you, you know, as a podcaster as well. So a lot of it ends up, you know, again, you know, one comes up on the other, and just the experiences obviously help, because every time you get behind the microphone, I think it was Roman Mars that said, like, all of us have 100 hours of awful audio in us and we just have to get it out. So, you know, anytime you get behind the microphone, I think you get a little better and a little more confident and a little more comfortable. And so it's like reps. It just helps.
I think the other aspect it speaks to is the fact that if people like you in one show, there's an aspect that they're drawn to that's your personality, right? And so I think it's not a far cry to think that if they would just naturally like you on another show because they like you, they like your personality, they like your delivery, they like you know, your tone of voice. And so it's you know, when that know, like, and trust factor, and you know, it's very easy to assume that, I mean, not easy to assume, but I think it's natural to think that they'll like you on another show as well.
I think it's a good sign that you're creating authentic connections with people, you know, and really being yourself, because I think that's right. I mean, I think you will get a lot of that, unless you're, you know, kind of putting on a front on a show and are different on one show than the other, and then maybe that wouldn't happen. But I think if you are having that, it's a good sign that you're allowing your true self to come out. And that was not the case on shows I ran before. You know, like when I was running a site called Midwest Sports Fans for a while, and that was when I first got into podcasting, was doing shows over there. And they just, you know, they never really caught on, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And I go back and listen to old episodes, and it doesn't really sound like me, I don't think, you know, but again, just kind of doing all those reps, getting more comfortable being myself. Now it's just, you know, the topic changes, but you know, my level of comfort talking about it, and hopefully how I am speaking doesn't change.
So you're a showrunner for 5 different podcasts, which I'm sure is giving new podcasters serious anxiety at this point. For those that are listening that haven't even started one, something I hear from people that are thinking of starting is this idea of it being too late to podcast. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that.
I think the best time to start a podcast was 2005 or 2004, and the next best time is now. I mean, you know, I guess it depends on what you mean by too late. You know, what people mean by too late. I get it. I mean, there's been kind of this big run, and you know, you were able, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago to be the only person in your space, and perhaps that opportunity may have passed you by, but I think the loss of that opportunity opens up another opportunity, which is that now a lot of the guesswork is out for what works and what doesn't. You know, we have so many examples of what works, and if you're struggling to figure out what niche to fill in your own market, go look at other markets and see how people have filled really busy niches, and maybe you can take that and apply it to your own market. And you can also, instead of having to guess, what should I do? How, you know, what niche should I fill in this market? Now you've got them all, and you can say, okay, there's this, there's a gap, there's this, boom, that gap, that's where I can fit in. And so I do think it may make your initial ability to get a whole bunch of attention a little bit less, but I think it actually can increase your ability to get the small but meaningful attention early, which is what is going to help you grow more anyway. So it's just how you view it, because really that would be the only difference. I mean, otherwise, starting now is great because you have all these examples of people who have started and messed up and failed, and you can learn from their experience, and the technology part is easier. And I mean, you know, there's like, you know, these solutions like PodClear and Castery and all of these other ones that make, you know, interviewing people and recording a conversation so much simpler. And some of them aren't ready for prime time yet, but they will be in 6 months to a year. And you think back to how it was to record an interview 4 or 5 years ago. I mean, man, people starting now have such an advantage in that sense. So it's just how you look at it. But I think if you've got something to say and, you know, you think there's an audience to serve, get out there and start it, because otherwise it's just paralysis by analysis, but you won't really know until you just get out there and do it. And so whether you started 10 years ago, whether you start now, the best time to start is right now. Get going.
Yeah, and I don't think we can predict where it's going to go and how there's going to be new things to talk about, and these new tools like Blab are coming on and Periscope, and it's just, and people are incorporating those into their podcasts. And so you're seeing this mesh of new technologies and podcasting happening. And it's true. I mean, it's an exciting time. And I just got started in early 2014. So, I think you can't be short-sighted, and we can't even try to predict what's coming down the road sometimes because we're just surprised.
No, you can't. And that too can intimidate people because it's like, well, I'm going to learn this and in 6 months it's going to change. And there are always going to be these new tools coming out. What doesn't change though is the fundamentals of how you develop a relationship with an audience. And if you learn those and if you put out content regularly, then you can do that. And that's the goal. That's the whole idea behind creating a podcast, is creating a more personal connection with an audience. And if you have that desire to do it, there really aren't any excuses for putting a show out there and letting that process start to begin, because once it starts happening, it's a wonderful thing.
So shifting gears a little bit, you were with Synthesis, which became part of Copyblogger Media. Mm-hmm. And so yes. I'm interested how the view has been from you at Copyblogger as podcasting was picking up, and the fact that Copyblogger itself was a blogging-centric platform. So I'm interested if you could speak a little bit about what the view has been like from inside Copyblogger as to what's happening with podcasting.
Sure. Yeah. It's been interesting because Copyblogger has always been very text-based, because Brian and Sonia and our main content creators have always been readers and writers. That's what they've loved to do. And certainly, there have been, audio lessons, and Teaching Sales had audio lessons and that kind of thing. But, there was Internet Marketing for Smart People, was, an original podcast that they had started, and it was on and off. And, Brian and Robert had dabbled in it a little bit, but it wasn't a real consistent focus, a consistent push. And so, I had hosted some shows, like I was, telling you, on Midwest Sports Fans. And so, we kind of started talking about, picking a podcast back up on Copyblogger. And so I restarted the Lede, and, eventually Damian Farnworth joined me, and we did that together. And, it was right about that time that we started looking at podcasting more seriously as a company. And so when it was time to launch the Rainmaker platform, which was basically the culmination of 5 years of work together between, Brian and all the partners at Copyblogger, that was what was decided, is we're going to launch this with a podcast. It's going to be totally different. It's going to be totally new. Some members of our audience aren't going to get it. Some members of our audience probably aren't going to like it, but this is the direction we're going in. I think, one of Brian's great skills has always been kind of being able to see the direction to go, be able to separate the signal from the noise. And I think he understood that, the direction that audio was going in. And so, we launched the new Rainmaker podcast, and that's how the Rainmaker platform was launched. And then we had the idea, hey, let's double down on this. We've got a lot of talented people inside the company who have a lot to say. Let's give everybody who wants a show. Let's start a network, and let's lead the charge when it comes to, digital marketing information online. Let's lead the charge and build up an audience with Rainmaker FM, and then figure out what to do with the audience, but use this as our main content marketing strategy for the platform. And because, we realized a lot of our target customers were going to be podcast listeners. And I think it's worked better than we expected. And we continue to obviously focus more and more on audio. But it was just, that's where everything was heading. And that's where a lot of audience members needed and wanted audio content from us. And this has now allowed us to take a lot of the ideas that we've written about and talked about over at Copyblogger for many years, and now put them into a new form for some of the same audience and to a brand new audience who's discovered us for the first time through podcasts.
And can you explain a little bit about the rebranding that you've recently done? It's now, or it's I don't know if it's an offshoot or so just to explain, Rainmaker.fm.
Yeah, well, there's Rainmaker FM, and then Rainmaker Digital is now the overall company name. So it was originally Copyblogger Media, and that encompassed Copyblogger, Studio Press, Synthesis, and then the Rainmaker platform, Rainmaker FM, and so now that's Rainmaker Digital. And really, I think it was just we felt like we'd outgrown the name Copyblogger because people ask who do you work for? You say Copyblogger. It doesn't. That name still has big brand value, but it's not very descriptive of who we are as a company anymore. And so we certainly never want to abandon that name, and that website and that blog will live on forever because it's just, it was obviously so important for content marketing and teaching people content marketing and continues to be. But Rainmaker Digital is more indicative of kind of the bigger, broader focus that our company has. And, plus just getting the term blog out of there, blog doesn't mean quite what it did once. And so I think just really it's a way to better describe who we are as a company and more than that, where we're going.
And what's the growth of the company look like?
It's it continues. I mean, we've grown in terms of numbers. In terms of employees, we continue to hire some new incredible people, and we continue to move into new projects. Obviously, Rainmaker FM continues to hum along, and we're working on a new project now, which is really going to focus on teaching people how to execute digital commerce strategies. Because obviously Copyblogger is really great at teaching content marketing. And I think with the Showrunner, really we've wanted to, we've used podcasting as a way to show people, how do you use content to build an audience and create an experience? Because as we know now, traditional marketing isn't quite as effective anymore. You've got to give people experiences. And so now you've created this experience. Okay, now how do you actually create a digital business around this? And that's what this new project is really going to show people. How do you create paid courses and get people to sign up for them? How do you utilize sophisticated marketing automation to inside of a paid member area that, helps you sell ebooks and, all the different, obviously, iterations that there are. That's really our next goal is kind of put it all together and really teach people and empower them to be successful, confident, strong digital business owners.
Because it seems like that's the trend now for anyone that's looking to do a digital business like podcasting or even speakers and authors. They need to sort of be jacks of all trades, right? You have to know the digital marketing piece. You need to understand the concept of a funnel and lead magnets and how to attract people on social media, and then use that attention and direct their eyeballs to where you want them to go, calls to action. And so there's a lot of moving parts, and I think people who have done this traditionally in the past and have just focused on their one skill set are probably being overwhelmed with all the things that they have to learn and be experts at if they're really going to succeed.
Yeah, and you look at the people who are successful at this, and they are good at all of this. So they don't necessarily have to be good at executing, because you can obviously hire and you can outsource people who have strengths that you don't. But I think you've really got to understand the bigger picture, the individual parts, and how all of those individual parts fit together to create that bigger picture.
Yeah, it's an exciting time and probably overwhelming for some people. But yes, for those of us that are drawn to all the ways these tools, and I'm a student of productivity as well. So anything where I find that makes my process, my production easier, I try to implement that as quick as possible, because I realize that that space that I just freed up is going to get filled up really, really quick. In nature abhors a vacuum, right? So, yeah. So I think anything we can do to work more efficiently is just going to help us in the long run.
Yeah. And the nice thing is too, it's overwhelming, just like you said. But the great thing is to remember, it all starts with an audience. So if you don't know what to do, start building an audience. I mean, that's the great thing. And that's where, podcasting is really an initial part of that step. You don't have to wait for everything else to be perfect. You can start building an audience, and you can have a hypothesis of where it may go, but chances are your hypothesis will be wrong. It'll go in a different direction, and that's totally okay. But now you're letting your audience, which is, if you have long-term thoughts of a digital business, they are your potential customers. You're letting them in on the conversation, letting them help you dictate where it goes just by their feedback and by their actions. And so instead of trying to figure it all out up here before you start, you don't have to have the perfect plan. You've just got to have some enthusiasm to start getting an idea out there and building an audience around it. And a lot of the other stuff, will start to be revealed, and you can learn it as you go. But I think the biggest mistake that people make is just not starting and feeling like they've got to do 100,000 things. No, eventually you'll do 100,000 things over the course of time. But right now you just got to do one thing and just get out there and do it and build an audience, build a connection. And, in a lot of ways that will help reveal a lot of these answers that we feel like we have to understand before we start.
Yeah, I think people suffer from deer in the headlights syndrome, and they're just overwhelmed about where to start and where to put their attention. And I think that's some of the things you and Johnny speak to on Showrunner, and I'm sure it's a lot of the things that you guys cover in the course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing you got to do is just start, and remember that the first episode you record, you don't have to release it, And in fact, a lot of people, I mean, I've never done this, and I really should. I'm not great at like recording and holding on to it. I always want to get it out there. I was talking earlier with Primility Primer how I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, which was a big step for me. Like I published, the first 4 or 5 episodes, but I didn't tell anybody I was doing it, which is hard. But remember that you can do that, and Johnny always talks about with Hack the Entrepreneur, how he put, he had like 10 episodes in the can before he ever launched. And you can do that. And, that, I think that also is freeing, that you can go in there and create some stuff, and if it's really, really bad to the point that you're embarrassed to let anybody hear it, great. Don't let them hear it. But you know what? You're now a better podcaster because you did that. And maybe now when you're ready for that next idea or that next show, you'll be a little bit further along. And that's, so that's all okay.
So with all the experience you have you tallied up the sum total episode wise with across the 5 podcasts, how much content you've put out?
I haven't. I've kind of been afraid to. One of these days, maybe I will, just to get the full count. But it's one of those things. I kind of enjoy, doing shows like this, and on the Showrunner, it's been fun to kind of step back and look at some of the other shows, because otherwise I'm just kind of like move forward, and it's like one episode's done, let's move on to the next one. And sometimes I almost have to remember, hey, I recorded this episode 2 weeks ago, but it's going live today. You got to be available to talk about it and remember to tweet it, because I'm always, now thinking 2 episodes down the road. And so that's actually a bit of a challenge to do that. But it's I think you learn, well, especially if you're going to balance a lot of shows at once, you kind of have to always be thinking ahead, because the minute that you rest on your laurels, you're going to miss a week, and you're going to flop in front of your audience, or you're going to go back on a promise that you made to them, which you don't want to do. So but it's like anything else. It's like a balance. You do want to balance looking forward with still being able to step back and learn from what you've done and kind of take it in. That's why I'm really glad to have a show like the Showrunner and to have the opportunity to do shows like this, because it forces me to step back and look at it and analyze. And always by the process of talking, I remember different lessons that I had forgotten or haven't thought about in a while, and it always helps moving forward.
So what do you think, with all those episodes under your belt, is your differentiating skill in either interviewing or in the way you tackle production?
I think my differentiator has always been and will always be bringing enthusiasm. I may not always bring the best explanation to the table, and so it may not always be the clearest explanation or any of that, but I think I'll always bring enthusiasm. And I think that enthusiasm also goes to preparing. So when it's for an interview or for anything, because I think that enthusiasm is what attracts people and what connects them to the shows that I do. And I always strive to make sure that they're informative and that they're educational or whatever someone's coming for. But the one thing that I feel like I can never fail my audience on is enthusiasm. I've got to bring that, because it's what they expect and it's what they deserve. And so to me, that's what the differentiator is. And I hope that I bring that to every episode.
So when you think about the arc of your career and all the jobs you've had leading up to this point, and you look back at where you were when you were younger, and are you surprised at where you're at now, or do you feel like sort of the pieces have been falling into place because they've been naturally lending themselves to things that were inherent in you?
That's a great question. I am surprised, and then I'm not. I mean, like when I was in college, right? When I was studying finance and real estate and entrepreneurship, I never would have thought that I would be doing this today. But then I look back on it, and I remember back in high school when my silly friends and I would create these audio adventures. We'd write like little scripts, and we'd have us and all of our friends like doing these wild and crazy things. And then we'd record it, and we'd do all the voices, and we're like imitating our friends. And these really funny things. We still have them on a CD somewhere, like get together and every now and then listen to one and be thoroughly entertained, but then simultaneously embarrassed and just hope that these never get out.
Sounds like podcasting.
But, yeah, exactly. Well, and it was, and so you think about that, and it's like, okay, so I've been drawn to doing this, and then Indiana basketball has been a lifelong passion. Now I have a show talking about that, and so I mean, I guess on one hand I am surprised, but on the other hand I'm not, because it's funny how just when and I firmly believe this, when you bring enthusiasm to what you're doing every day, you're going to eventually end up in the spot that you're supposed to be in, because it just happens, and so. I guess that whatever this winding road has been, it's led me to where I am now, and I feel fulfilled with what I'm doing, and I feel like I'm in the right place. So I never would have predicted this, and yet, you kind of look back on it, and it's like, yeah, all right, this makes sense.
Yeah, it's awesome. Do you maintain a relationship with any sort of mentor or someone that you continue to look to that keeps you on top of your game or continues to inspire you?
I mean, one of the reasons why working for Copyblogger Rainmaker Digital has been so great, especially for someone like me that when I joined in January of 2013 had not heard of Copyblogger. Like I'd run a successful blog, but it was all based on just kind of creating viral traffic and making money off of display ads. There was no build an email list. There was no build an audience. I knew none of that stuff. And so working with people like Sonia Simone and Robert Bruce and Damian Farnworth and Brian Clark, I mean, when you can actually work with the people who are your mentors, like that's a really special thing. And so, and I feel really, really lucky to be in that position. Chris Garrett, is another one. And so I would say for me, those are the main people. And I think now that, as I, become more mature in the company and obviously have learned more, now I'm kind of branching out more, and learning from different sources and frankly being encouraged to do so. And so, but I can't stress enough how so much of what I say on the Showrunner and so much of what has become my philosophy about building an audience is really just distilling all the lessons that I've learned from the people I've been lucky enough to work with.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I know we could definitely keep on chatting about a bunch of other topics and a bunch of other questions that I have in my mind. But I'm wondering, what is one of the most misunderstood things about you?
One of the most misunderstood things. That's a really good question. I think I would say, especially because we try and go off the cuff so much on the Showrunner, and I've gotten to a level of comfort on shows where I like them to be spontaneous, that I think it's misunderstood how much preparation goes into that. And even a non-scripted show, how often it's outlined and really thought through. And, it's one of the things, like it takes effort to make it seem like there's no effort. And so I think I kind of like that, because I think, okay, I'm succeeding in what I'm trying to do. But I think that can be a bad thing too, when you're trying to use yourself as an example for what people can do. And they think, well, I can't just get on the microphone and do that. And I think, well, neither could I 500 episodes, or if I didn't just spend an hour, sitting down and preparing and really thinking about what I wanted to say beforehand. And so I think that sometimes gets misunderstood, and every now and then it needs to be, explained, just because you don't want people thinking that it's, and shoot, and I really learned this when we were at our Authority Rainmaker event last year, and Henry Rollins spoke. And if you've ever seen Henry Rollins speak, it is just, hours, a couple hours of intensity, and he gets up there. There's nothing. There's no teleprompter. There's no slides. There's not even any movement. Like, he plants his feet on the stage and then we'll just talk and tell stories for hours. And I'm watching him and I'm thinking, man, he's just doing all of this from memory, and he's doing all of this. And so I talked to him afterwards, and the one question I got to ask him was about his preparation, and how does he deliver these stories so well? And they seem so well structured, and yet there's nothing, it's all coming out of his mind. And he said, I've just told them over and over and over again, walking along Santa Monica Beach and pacing around in my hotel room, just practicing and telling them. He's like, I knew what the audience was for this. I know all of my different stories. I kind of had an outline for which stories I wanted to tell and when, and then I just practice them over and over. And it's like, oh yeah, that's right. There is no magic for this. There's just preparation and enthusiasm. And if you bring that to it, hopefully you're going to create something good for an audience. So I think that, I misunderstood that about him. I think sometimes, people that we'll talk with on the Showrunner misunderstand that about me. And it's important because I don't think anybody, maybe there are a few exceptions, but I don't think anybody is just going to magically be able to just create all this great content. There's no substitute for experience and for hard work.
Oof, that's a fantastic way to wrap this up. Last lighthearted question. You have a picture on Twitter of you on a mountain?
I do.
Where was that?
That's in the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
That was, when was that? That was probably, my dad's originally from Colorado. Okay. He grew up in Boulder, Colorado. And so we used to go out there maybe once a year. And I haven't been back as much as I like to actually do hiking. But yeah, that was, I don't know, it was probably 2002 or 2003, I think. And we hiked up to the top of this mountain, and I, went over there and was just kind of sitting, and I'd had a journal with me, and I'd been writing some stuff down in a journal. So I didn't even know that my dad was taking that picture. But I've always loved that picture, because to me, like, that picture is a visual representation of Primility, because, it was a long hike. It took us all day, and it was kind of this off the beaten path part, to where you probably shouldn't go. And it's, you're climbing up some rocks, and it's a little bit dangerous, but not too dangerous. But you still, like, you're up there and you feel this sense of accomplishment and the sense of pride. Like, I'm on top of the mountain, but then you look around you and there's all these mountains that are bigger. So it's like, you've got this pride, but here's this, the humility is right there too, because yeah, like, good for you. You climbed up to the top of this little mountain, but now look at what else Mother Nature has in store for you. So I've always, like, whenever I look at that picture, that's what I think of. And actually, for my dad's birthday, maybe it was Christmas, like 3 or 4 years ago, I got that picture blown up, and like one of those big successories, how they have the inspirational picture, and then there's like the quote, the word underneath it, like, you'll always miss 100% of the shots you don't take, something like that. And so I've got that picture with Primility, and then achieve anything you love and are capable of by balancing pride and humility underneath it. So I love that picture. It's one of those pictures, that it's not 1,000 words, it's like 1,000,000 words to me every time I look at it, just remembering kind of the moment of when I was there.
Sounds like that's one of the first products you can offer on the Primility website.
It's a good idea. I didn't even think about that. That's a good idea. I have to ask my dad if it's okay.
Yeah. Well, Jerod, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. This is fun.
What's the best place for folks to track you down?
The best place, Twitter's always good, at Jerod Morris, and frankly, I love connecting with people via email. So if people ever want to shoot me an email, you can send it Jerod@primility.com or Jerod@copyblogger.com. Either one, it comes to the same place. So yeah, I'd love to connect that way too.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, and I hope you have a fantastic week and keep up the thoroughly engaging content that you're producing with all the podcasts, and I'm wishing you the best of luck.
Thank you. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
So I'm not going to ask if you enjoyed that. I know you did. There was so much information there that it was so much fun to listen to again. And it was a reminder of the actual conversation and how happy I was that I had a chance to talk to Jerod. Obviously, with the number of podcasts that he's producing and the fact that he's the host of the Showrunner and that has a ton of experience working with Copyblogger and Rainmaker, there's just so much insight that he provided, and I'm really happy I got the chance to speak to him. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well. I think he touched on a lot of topics that were interesting for me. He's obviously well-rounded and a student of the origins of words, and that's why he took it upon himself to create this concept of primility, which is the combination of pride and humility, which I think we all could benefit from. And it's been one of my must-listen podcasts recently. They're really short episodes, so I recommend you check that out as well, because I think anything we can do to help balance pride with humility is a good thing in my mind. And so there was some really good feedback for folks that are starting a podcast. Remember, everyone who thinks it's too late, it's not. And if you need a reminder as to why, then go listen to the episode again. And I think it's important to think about why or what it is about listening to podcasts or about having your own podcast that makes you happy, and keep that as your primary focus as you go through your day. This is a long haul, and remember, it's about the journey, not about the destination. So please keep that in mind, and I'm glad we touched on that topic today. And if you get a chance, please listen to the Showrunner or Primility Primer or his other podcasts as well. We'll have them listed in the show notes. If you want all the details, go to podcastjunkies.com/58. I'd be interested to find out if how many of you actually look at show notes. I like to have them as a reference point. I know obviously not everybody is going to check them out, but for me, it's an interesting way to document the conversation. And occasionally I find myself taking a look at show notes from previous episodes, and it's a nice recap of the things we spoke about. And I think for future reference and in an effort to make the content evergreen, I think it's something that I encourage podcasters to continue to do. And if only for the one or two people that go check it out, occasionally references will be made, show links will be mentioned, websites will be mentioned, or books. And it's nice to have that as a point to go back to and see what it is they were speaking about. If you'd like to get signed up and be notified even sooner about episodes, then you can do it a couple of different ways. The easiest one is if you're mobile, you can just text a message to 33444. with the word Podcast Junkies, all one word, and you'll be given the instructions for signing up. If you're near a computer, just head on over to podcastjunkies.com, and we've got the sign up page front and center for you, making it really easy for you to sign up, and you'll get a free PDF as an added bonus. I don't necessarily bombard folks with email, but occasionally when there's an event coming up or a recap of guests that have appeared on the show, for the most part, that's what I use it for. So check that out, and it's a way for me to continue to stay engaged with you, and it's appreciated when you sign up. Another way you can show appreciation is to support the show with a rating or a review. If you haven't done so already, then take a couple of minutes to actually stop and go do that now, because that's a way to support the show if it's something you've been listening to on a regular basis, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Although if you do have some spare change burning a hole in your pocket, Patreon is one way you can support the show. So head on over to patreon.com/podcastjunkies. Again, for another opportunity for you to support what we do and what I do, because it's what I love. And I really enjoy going out of my way to try to find the most engaging guests to tell some stories that you may not have heard in other places. And that's something that I'm going to keep on doing for you. So thanks again for listening. And musical credit, once again, goes to Cedar and Soil. Go to cedarsoil.com and listen to some of his fantastic other music that he's created. I recently had the chance to catch up with George, who's Cedar and Soil in Brooklyn. We haven't seen each other in a while, and it was nice to get caught up. And as always, his taste in music is something that I truly admire and respect. So if you're a musician and looking for some inspiration, go check that out. And last but not least, the listener retention hashtag is going to be Jerod5. So Jerod for Jerod Morris, and the number 5. So Jerod5, hashtag Jerod5. And as a tribute to the number of podcasts that he produces, and as an inspiration for you, if you haven't started yours, to get up off your butt and get moving. So thanks again, guys. I really enjoy spending this time with you, and I look forward to catching up with you guys next week. Have a fantastic week, and engage with us on social media, and I'll be sure to engage back. Take care.